Determine whether the function f of x equals the square root of 1 minus x squared is even, odd, or neither. Well, to do this, we should quickly review what an odd and an even function is. A function is even if f of negative x equals f of x. That means for this function, if we were to substitute negative x every time we see x, and then if we were to simplify it, if that function f of negative x equaled our original function, if it was the same as the original function, then this function would be even. What about an odd function? Well, a function is odd if f of negative x equals negative fx. That means for this function, if whenever we see x, if we were to replace it with negative x, and then if we were to simplify this expression, if that equaled negative f of x, in other words, if it equaled this same original equation with a negative sign out the front, then we could say that this function is odd. Well, in order to determine whether the function is even, odd, or neither, and if it's neither, neither of these conditions holds, in order to determine that, the best thing to do, the best way to go about it, is just to consider f of negative x. Consider what f of negative x equals, simplify it, and then consider whether any of these hold true, either of these hold true. So let's do that. So here, f of negative x, what we have to do is we have to replace this x with a negative x and then simplify. So let's do that. So we'll write square root 1 minus, and then we have this x. So we'll do a bracket here, and we'll replace this x with a minus x, and that's squared. Okay, let's go about simplifying this. So to simplify this, we'd write square root 1 minus, and here we've got negative x squared. Well, if we were to do in blue just the side here, if we say negative x squared, that's the same as saying negative x times negative x. Well, we know that negative 1 times negative 1 is 1, or 1 squared, which is the same as 1. So here, negative x times negative x, well, that's just going to equal x squared, because the negative and the negative will cancel out and form a positive. So here, this negative x squared is going to equal x squared. Well, what's funny about this is f of negative x equals the square root of 1 minus x squared. Well, that's our original function. That also is f of x. So we can write here, instead of writing this expression, we can simply write f of x. So what we found is that f of negative x equals f of x. And by our definition up here, if a function, if we have f of negative x equals f of x, then that function is even. Consequently, we've determined that the function f of x equals the square root of 1 minus x squared. We've determined that is an even function. So this function is even. And we're done.